笑，滔滔灭共潮。沧海一声笑，滔滔灭共潮。四海英雄聚今朝，苍天笑，花间战红腰，浪沙淘尽怒白霄。整整70年，他把中华人民奴役，还让这片土地变得满目疮痍。全世界投毒制造各种生化武器，我去，他答应了人类命运共同体。3代爆料，携手占有新天道，振兴我中华同胞，兴起了灭共浪潮。壮志冲云霄，看那国旗飘飘，别鸟铁岭河上，神州阳光普照。江山笑，夜雨遥，谁负谁生出一份笑。风萧萧，人笑先入朝，盘古开天风潮。3年多的爆料，就是这压死磕中方实锤，每天都有一点也不嫌多。以美灭共，以共灭共，还得靠我们战友们行动。也有我中华儿女共建联邦新中国，黑夜显出我照亮东方的眼，说吧宏伟的诺言，我准备了30多年，越过了死亡幽谷，踏上了灭共之路。总有太多雄剑不出啊，只能虚度。听梦想，收归正道，一周他老自逍遥。苍生笑，热血万丈高，仰天长啸志英豪。战友们豪气穿云霄，寒武相聚在今朝。我定方 The one to save the world, sitting behind the people's side. We are running out of time. Take down, action, take down the CCP. Take down, action, take down the CCP. La 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 la, la 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 la, la 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 CCP 你完了。
Enjoy the first touch with sunshine, meditating every breath. Different moods fill up my mind, spread up into my touch was sunshine, meditating every breath. Different was filled up by my switch up into my life, feeling smooth. Houston, Lister on the
I just down to the south, all the things going on. New spot, real hot game, stop things not. What's the trend to the next? Hopping on a new life. Lately I've been really out of my mind. People only could talk. I don't wanna waste my time living up off the way I'm sad, cause the feeling aren't real. I ain't gonna take about pills, falling voice up on a hill, cause I ain't never gonna fold. Played away illusion last night, legendary rocks on the road.
Working on the road.
Woo! For a long time, ain't no way to keep it on the low.
enjoy the first touch with sunshine, meditating every breath. Different was filled up by my switch up into my life, feeling smooth. Houston, Lister on
When the sun goes down, the starlight scene. Have you ever imagined Houston shine like this? Pull up to our Houston, let's start farm, come to join it. Give yourself an arm, find yourself here, create yourself a place. Let's pick up, let's start rocket to the space. Honka woke me up from my long last dream. Feel like I'm used to trapping into the real. It's me, we're living in the same road, hitting different scene. Now we're looking for a solid team, we're looking for a solid team.
I never felt so good. Give yourself a shit. You don't wanna miss it. Houston.
Good evening, Fringers. It is May 11th, 2021. Thank you for joining us, and welcome to episode 35 of The Fringe. I'm your host, David Vincent Bob. The Fringe is simultaneously broadcast in English and in Chinese on gtv.org, MOS Talk, every Tuesday and Friday night from 7 to 8 p.m. We are honored to have you with us here this evening, and we appreciate your patronage. Please spread the word about our show to all of your friends and family, and subscribe and follow us on gtv.org at MOS Talk. I would now like to introduce my co-host for the evening. It's always great to have her on the show every Tuesday night. She brings in really good reporting and analysis to the table every time she's with us. Fringers, please join me in giving a nice big welcome to Isla. Welcome back to the show, Isla. It's so great to see you again.
Thank you so much, David, and good Fringers. I would like to thank all of your continuous support for our program and following our Moss channel. So this week we had a couple revealing the issues of the COVID-19 media channels. Before we take a closer look on what kind of information they have been discussed widely, as usual, let's take a look at the latest data first. We currently have 109 million cases of COVID-19 on a global scale, and that means one case per 37 people. And let's do another simple calculation to see how crazy the pandemic spreads within short periods of time. We had 3 million increasing in the past 7 days under the circumstances of many governments, including ours, pushing massive vaccine projects. And it is time for us to ask, where does this virus come from? How should we end this pandemic? Should we rely on the vaccine? What specific ties between this virus and the Chinese Communist Party should the public be warned? And if you keep tracking the data, you will realize we don't have much time left. David.
Yeah, that's the truth, and we also have been covering what's going on in India the past few episodes, how horrible it is over there right now. They're pretty much at an apocalyptic point right now with that virus, and it's not getting any better. And that's why we're here, spread the news, and to figure out, to expose the CCP, and to figure out a way to stop their reign and their tyranny over not only China but the rest of the world. Our first segment tonight we'll deal with one of my favorite channels in Australia, Sky News. They're 100% pro us. We love them very much. We love covering the news that they cover. We always are on the same page with them, and think the same way. Think alike, as they say. What they have tonight is available data firmly in favor of the theory of COVID-19 coming from the lab in roll that video now, please, Chris.
Let me stick with this coronavirus and how you have had the truth kept from you. More than 3 million people now around the world have died so far from this coronavirus, and the lives of billions of people have been totally disrupted. I mean, look at your own. And the extraordinary thing is that we still do not know how this virus started. Or let me be more accurate, we are still not told how this virus started. Was it a natural outbreak? No one to blame. Or did it in fact escape from a Chinese laboratory? And then we do have someone to blame. I raise this again because of a brilliant new article in the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists, which says too many people want to keep from you the truth. That fact that the evidence now strongly suggests that this virus was created by Chinese scientists who then let it escape. Now, as the article makes clear, I mean, top virologists don't want you to know this, because this is in fact the kind of lethal research that they've been working on as well, to make viruses more lethal, to supposedly then discover better treatments. Some top American science bureaucrats don't want you to know either, because they were actually funding this virus work at China's Institute of Virology in Wuhan, exactly where this pandemic started. What are the odds? And obviously China doesn't want you to know, because then the world will hold it to account, demand some compensation. And of course, there were also all the Trump-hating journalists who did not want you to even think that US President Donald Trump was actually right when he said this virus did escape from the Wuhan Institute of Virology. Nonsense, said our ABC.
So how likely is it that the virus escaped from that Chinese lab? Well, in short, it's not, despite concerns expressed by the Americans in 2018 about lax standards, and despite what President Trump has been saying.
Now, if blaming China now sounds like a conspiracy theory, note that even President Joe Biden's new head of national intelligence says, yes, this virus could have escaped from that Chinese lab, and US agencies are checking that out.
It is absolutely accurate. The intelligence community does not know exactly where, when, or how COVID-19 virus was transmitted initially. But we're continuing to work on this issue and collect information.
And ask yourself, as this new paper does so brilliantly, and I urge you to look it up on the web, of all the places in the world where this brand new coronavirus breaks out, a virus that is immediately very well adapted to killing humans, that looks nothing like what we've seen in other coronaviruses, that comes without warning, that has features you don't actually expect in a coronavirus without genetic engineering. What are the odds that that kind of virus broke out accidentally in exactly the city with an institute that's working to create exactly this kind of virus, and in a lab that had poor safety procedures, and in a dictatorship that now won't let investigators see the original medical records of the very first people to get infected?
So there we are, another episode and another news source that agrees with us and what's going on with this coronavirus. We have been telling people from the beginning the cause of this virus, where it comes from, and who created it. The truth has been kept from you fringers. It has been kept from you Americans. It has been kept from the rest of the world. We have proof of that. When we tried to go over, the CDC tried to go over to China to investigate, and that turned out to be a big joke, a big party. They never found anything out. They just had a lot of wine and food, wine to drink and food to eat. Meanwhile, 3 million people died from this virus. And like we said earlier, like we said in the past couple of episodes, it's at its worst right now in India. And you've been told how it started. Again, this started in a lab in Wuhan, and the CCP is to blame, the Chinese Communist Party. We've been saying it for 35 episodes. Dr. Li Mingyang has been saying it for over a year now. She defected from China, put her life on the line and her family's life on the line to be the savior for us and tell us what was happening, that this thing was genetically created in a lab. And it seems to me, Isla, that people are starting to wake up a little bit too late. Yes, they are at least waking up, but so many lives could have been saved if people would have just listened. And we've been saying that from the beginning too. We really wish, Isla, that people would have just listened to us, and they didn't. All the way back in the beginning. If they would have just listened and wouldn't have hated Donald Trump and not listened to anything he said, and because of their internal feelings about this man, ignored the warnings that he gave us that were spread over here and given to us by the reputable Dr. Yan, who knew exactly what was happening, we'd have a different scenario today. I really believe that. I think a lot less people would have died, and a lot less people would be infected, and the economy would be better. We'd be seeing a lot of different things right now, but that's not happening. As this gentleman said on Sky News, this virus is very well adapted to killing humans. It comes without warning, and it's not like any other virus we've ever seen, any other coronavirus we've ever seen. Obviously, is the product of genetic engineering and used just for that purpose, to wipe out humanity, basically. And that's what they're doing in China right now. We've had reports in the past where we've had Gordon Chang on talking about what's going to happen next, where this virus is, and what the CCP plans on doing next. They have hundreds of labs. This is only one lab where they created one virus. They're working on creating a virus that will wipe out humanity. And that's not a joke. That's really happening. Are we going to be assertive this time, or are we just going to let that happen too? Because when you let that happen, it's all over. It's game over. None of us live except for the CCP. And that's what they want. They want to rule the world on their own, by their own, and they'll either do it by wiping out the population or controlling the population. And right now they're doing it by controlling the population. They've done everything they wanted to do with this virus. They've scared everybody. They've kept us holed up in our apartments and our homes. They've kept us out of schools. They kept our children from learning properly. They've done everything they needed to do. This is terrorism at a biological level. And of course, the CCP won't let anyone see their records. We already tried that. I think what needs to happen now, that people are, thank God, starting to catch on, is we need to hold them accountable for this virus, Isla. That's the end game. That's what we need to do.
Right, David. I think you're 100% correct, especially about how before the White House has been switching the mission office, before when Donald Trump was still in the office, how all of those medias are trying to politicizing the virus and the theory of its lab origin. But what we see today is that more and more media channels, including Sky News, have been confirmed the Wuhan Institute of Virology as the origin of this COVID pandemic. And this is obvious, very much obvious progress for us, especially in the mainstream media. And for people who are in the whistleblowers movement for a long time, a lot of people have been very familiar with the WIV, the Wuhan lab. It was a lab largely connected with the PLA biological projects and had been warned multiple times of safety concerns in the past 5 years. But in this case, I think the Chinese Communist Party is not the only one to blame, because there are other Western scientists, including Dr. Fauci, to assist funding the Chinese Communist Party to build the Wuhan lab and other biological labs in China. They also lead misinformation with the Chinese Communist Party to mislead the world in this pandemic. Recently, the president of Brazil, Jair Bolsonaro, recently just implied that the COVID-19 was related to biowarfare and the military knew the truth. This sounds very exciting, isn't it? So who's next? Dr. Li Menyan was the first one to define the COVID-19 pandemic as an unrestricted biological warfare in her second Dr. Yan report. And now people are paying attention to her words, paying attention to her interview, and slowly confirming that all of her scientific reports, scientific evidence had been the truth of this COVID-19. So India Today recently just interviewed Dr. Li Menyan, but we all know that this isn't enough, especially we have so much mainstream media still getting confusing and being misled by the information sent by the Chinese Communist Party. So who else needs to listen to Dr. Li Menyan? I think our answer has always been very clear, everyone. David.
Great point. That's right. Everyone needs to listen. And luckily, we've had the luxury of having been able to listen to her and understand what she's talking about. And we've been trying to warn people. And the last episode or the episode before, I also talked about how other mainstream medias are starting to open up to this. Dr. Janine Pirro had just some awesome comments about this virus and how it was lab created. And it's almost like we've been, finally people are starting to listen to us. And that is a good sign, Isla. And it's something that Isla said. She mentioned the PLA. For those of you that don't know, that's the People's Liberation Army. And that actually segues nice into our next segment, which is kind of a piggyback ride on this segment we just did. And it's another report from Sky News and its Chinese interest in bioweapons is revealed in a document that was released 5 years before the COVID outbreak. Could we roll that video now, please?
It's been revealed Chinese military scientists discussed the benefits of bioweapons in a document written 5 years before the start of the COVID pandemic. The Chinese language paper describes SARS coronaviruses as heralding a new era of genetic weapons. It also claims bioweapons could be mass-produced at 0.05% of the cost of traditional arms. The People's Liberation Army scientists are among 18 authors of the 261-page document.
Yeah, so that was just a quick quip we had there from Sky News. And what's going on here is something that's starting to get discussed among all the mainstream media outlets, which I don't listen to much anyway, but it's always kind of interesting when you see that they're, finally catching on to what we've been telling people here at GTV and G News for a long, long time now. A paper was written by the People's Liberation Army, and it was actually turned into a book. They were one of the co-authors of it, and I have a copy of the book right here with me, and it's called Unrestricted Warfare. There's the book right there if you're interested in it. And actually, Isla brought up an interesting point, is now that this book is getting talked about so much, the CCP has raised the price on it in China, and it costs like $80 to buy this book now in China. And basically, this book was written, you can see at the top here, translated from the original People's Liberation Army documents. And that's what we're talking about here, is these documents were written about unrestricted biological warfare against the rest of the world, and they wrote a book about it. And all the answers are in this book, people. If you have a chance, go out and get it and read it. It's a heck of a book, and it'll open your eyes, it'll scare you, and it'll make you see what's really going on here. We kind of use this as our Bible to rely on. But let's get back to the topic at hand here. And that is, what is this virus that we have known about for a long time? And this virus is a new era of weapons. That's correct. The SARS and coronavirus was created in a lab, and they know now that has happened. We've actually known it for a long time. And what's very interesting about that report was these bioweapons, which can kill millions, hundreds upon millions, and billions of more people than regular ammunition, gunfire, bombs, tanks, grenades, smoke grenade, whatever you have, can be produced at 0.05% of the cost of arms. And what they're talking about is ammunition. Again, that includes big ammunition too, like tanks, rockets, anti-tank warfare rockets, bullets, and any kind of ammo, guns, whatever you need to have an all-out war on land or sea. Ships, which also carry ballistic missiles that they fire upon the land and on each other in the water. This virus is much cheaper to create and kills a lot more people. How sadistic is that, Isla? That they're thinking about how, well, let's just try to see how we can have a war with other countries and terminate everybody with the cheapest means and cheapest way possible to save us a bunch of money. This is unbelievable. That's something I never thought about. I'm glad, like I said before on this show, I love doing this show, and this is one of the reasons. You learn something new every night, and you get to share that information with other people. 0.05% cost of arms. That in itself is just staggering. That, first of all, they would even know that, and second of all, that they would even attempt to do that. So these People's Liberation Army scientists are among 18 authors of this document, and this book was written and created because of that. So that's what they were focusing on here in Australia. And something else to think about, we're actually going to talk about this later, is Australia is going at it with the CCP right now. They are not on good terms, and we're going to talk about that later. Okay, Isla, I want to turn it over to you now. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Sorry, my dog was getting so excited today, so you guys may hear some noise from him. But what I'm trying to say, especially on this COVID, the bio warfare and the biological paper that you saw from the Chinese Communist Party, is that the CCP, especially the Chinese military, have proved weaponizing coronavirus since 2015. And PLA scientists, officials, made predictions about World War III being fought with biological weapons that could cause the enemy's medical systems to collapse. That means the Chinese Communist Party had planned on launching biological warfare against the world for a very long time. And the logic's very simple here. First of all, CCP doesn't care about its own people. This is why we're so familiar with all of the things that happened under this regime. They disappeared the whistleblowers, they suppressed the dissidents, and covered up the actual number of cases of COVID-19 in mainland China. And what CCP actually wants is worldwide domination. So taking over the United States, using communism, socialism ideologies to brainwash their citizens, in turn interfering with your basic human rights, taking away your freedom of thoughts, and everything you do, they let you serve the party. And that's what they do every day. And that's what the essence of this party. So this book, as David mentioned and showed to our fringers, has mentioned how the CCP wants to develop non-traditional bioweapons and use denial and misinformation to mislead the world. This is exactly what we see that the CCP had planned on this COVID pandemic. We saw there are misleading information over the media, and we saw how this COVID-19 had interfered with all of the medical system that we see in the Western countries and had to try to destroy the normal social order that used to be established in the Western societies. So especially, for the virus part, despite the low mortality rate of this virus, this pandemic caused secondary damage to the society and the medical system in general. Isn't that true, David?
Yeah, you made some really, really great points there, Isla. And one of the ones that really stands out to me, again, is something that we talk about on most of our episodes. And that's the fact that, people, I think, are not akin to what's really going on here. This people, my fringers out there, my friends, my family, anyone that doesn't know this, there's an actual biological war going on right now. And China struck first. What are we going to do, Isla? That's the question that needs to be asked. We're worried about, in our country, transgenderism. We're worried about basketball players talking about BLM and our country dividing itself because our government wants it to be that way. And we're talking about tax hikes, and we're talking about things that just aren't important, when behind the red curtain, what's really happening is there's a country out there right now that has declared war on the rest of the world, including their own allies. Lots of people in Russia and Iran died from this, although they have pledged an alliance to each other recently. Russia, Iran, and China have all pledged an alliance to each other, and they are now being called the axis of evil. And that's the irony of the whole thing, is they all know clearly that China wants to be the #1 superpower in this world. And that's the scariest part about it, is that they're willing to go along with them to say, well, you know what, and I think the reason they do it is not only because Russia used to be communist, is just because they're probably afraid, or if they side with China, maybe they think, well, if we side with China, maybe we won't be as affected by the punishment that the CCP is putting on the rest of the world with this virus. So there's a lot of things that need to be looked into, and we need to read in between the lines about this, Isla, because this isn't just about a virus that broke out and we're trying to figure out, the rest of the world is trying to figure out how to recover from it. We need to remember that there's 100 other labs, just like the one in Wuhan, where they're creating this virus, and they have a virus they're trying to create that they speculate, as Gordon Chang said, is going to be used to wipe out humanity. And that's the sickest thing that any human being or any organization or any country could ever want to do. I understand countries being at odds with each other and not agreeing with each other's policies. But what the CCP has planned, and take this for what it is, people, this is the truth. They want to take over this entire world. They want to dominate you. They want to control you, and they're doing it right now with this coronavirus, and it's working. It's working. Isn't that right, Isla?
Right, David. I think particularly when you read that book, when you see that it was published a long time ago, you will think about that's actually a confession that the CCP had made.
And that's the book Isla's talking about. Are you there, Isla? Sorry.
Yes.
Okay.
Can you see me?
Yeah, you're fine. The sound just cut out there. Or you finished? I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I think your dog agrees with everything you're saying too. Really, that you can hear a strong argument from the dog to listen, people. That's what he's saying. He's telling you to listen. So anyway, some of the fun we have here, I guess you could say, on the show is we are not in a studio, so we have to make do with what we have, and we just kind of roll with the punches, and that's great. Okay, so let's move on now. We're going to segue here into something that really bothers me as a veteran. As you know, I'm a veteran of the United States Marine Corps, and there are veterans in New York City right now that are threatening legal action after they're being denied a parade permit. Let's roll that video.
Welcome back. Staten Island veterans are threatening legal action against New York City after they were denied a permit for their 102nd annual Memorial Day parade. This comes after Mayor Bill de Blasio allowed a cannabis parade just last week. Here with more in their battle with the city, member of the United Staten Island Veterans Organization, Lee Cavino, and attorney Brendan Lantry. Thank you both for being here. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Good morning, Julian.
Good morning. Lee, I want to start with you. First of all, as a U.S. Army veteran, thank you for your service. Second of all, I want to know what this parade means to you.
Well, it's ironic because we've lost many people in over 200 years of military service the freedom to march down Broadway with a joint. And we're just hoping we can remember those people with our parade.
Absolutely. Brendan, so tell me what happened here and why you were denied a permit.
Sure. So for, as you said, 102 years, the United Staten Island Veterans Organization, UCVO, has held its annual Memorial Day celebration here in Staten Island. And the veterans, just as they do every year, they applied for their permit through the NYPD and 3 months in advance, and they were denied. They were denied, citing Mayor de Blasio's executive orders on parades. Yet just last week, the cannabis parade was held up and down Broadway, Park Avenue. Several different blocks of Manhattan were blocked off. NYPD personnel was present, police barricades, and essentially it was a parade. Even if there wasn't a permit, there was a parade, although we've since learned that there was a permit issued by the Parks Department in New York City.
So what now, Brendan?
So now, Lee and some of the folks in UCVO have contacted me and my firm, Metacucci Villachilmi, and we're working pro bono to get them their parade permit. So we're hoping that the city, we gave them a deadline of today at noon. We're hoping that they provide them with a permit by then. If not, we're going to be bringing an action in Supreme Court here in Staten Island, New York, in New York State, to force them to do so.
Well, I'd love for you to keep us updated to see if you hear any response from them. Lee, you know, there's been so much that's gone on with coronavirus in the last year and a couple months, with restrictions, you know, with so many people not being able to go to church, kids not being able to go to school, not being able to have parades. But one thing I think that never changes is our appreciation as a country for all of our service members, those who are still here and those who have made the ultimate sacrifice and have, you know, passed away after fighting for our rights here in this country. So why do you think now more than ever it is so important for us to be able to honor all of those lives?
Well, it's important because, especially for the kids, that's who the parents usually take to these parades. And, you know, we want to show them, the veterans, they're walking history. Every veteran has a different piece of history they can tell you, from the Pearl Harbor guys, who are getting very old at this point, to people that just got back from Iraq and Afghanistan. So we want those kids to see real life history from their borough, Staten Island, marching down Forest Avenue.
Absolutely. Lee Covino, thank you very much for joining us and for your service. Brendan Lantry, thank you as always. We did reach out to Mayor Bill de Blasio's office for a statement. We did not hear back, but we certainly hope to hear a positive update on your story. Thank you very much, both of you.
See ya.
Well, there you go. Of course they didn't hear back from de Blasio, Isla, because he's a piece of crap anyway, and he's on his way out. So, and hopefully Cuomo will be following his coattails and getting out also. They need to revamp that city completely. When Giuliani was in office, I don't know if you remember this, but New York was chaotic before Giuliani came in office, and he cleaned up that city and made it the beautiful city that it was until Cuomo and de Blasi, whatever, I don't want to say his name, de Blasio, wrecked everything again. And it's just another example of how the Democrats roll. This is unbelievable. This, to me, nothing gets my blood boiling more than when you hold, when you are like anti-veteran. There is something seriously wrong with this. When you will allow a cannabis parade to occur. See, that's what I'm talking about. Like, it's more important to talk about legalizing marijuana than to respect the veterans that fight for this country and those who have died for this country. Memorial Day is for those who have died, but Veterans Day is in respect for those that are serving now or have served and are still alive. And this is just shocking to me. They won't let the veterans have a parade, but they'll let BLM and Antifa march down the street, rob, pillage, destroy, burn, loot, steal, murder people, but the veterans can't have a parade to show how proud they are to have served this country, so these people have the right to burn it down. It doesn't make any sense to me at all. This is very disturbing, and we need to definitely somehow, well, de Blasio and Cuomo are going to be gone soon, but that's just a microcosm of the bigger problem here. And it's that where our country is right now mentally, and it's in a really bad place, that we have to focus on issues that are just not important whatsoever. We have no church right now, no school, no veterans parades, but we can have parades to promote Marxism, legalizing drug use, homosexuality, and other twisted ideologies. That's okay, but we can't honor the people that every day put their every day now put their lives on the line so we can be free. This isn't what freedom's about. You don't grant people freedom and risk your life to make sure that those that are back at home are free, so you can treat your planet and treat your fellow humans this way. This isn't how it works. It's absolutely ridiculous, and it makes no sense to me at all. And I certainly hope that this almost, I keep thinking about this when I'm talking about it. This almost seems like it's not even real that this is happening. I can't even believe I'm sitting here of all the things to talk about, and we're talking about how they won't give veterans a parade. It's just, I can't even wrap my head around this. It's so ridiculous that this can happen in our country today. Over to you, Isla.
Yeah, David, this is very disturbing. I think about the parade itself, I have something to share. When I first came into the United States, I view parade as a symbol of freedom in this land. Because ever since the 1989 Tiananmen Square incident, not a single Chinese citizen would be allowed to join or participate in a parade in mainland China. And ever since the CCP has pushed the national security law over Hong Kong, they have been tried to kill and arrested over thousands of Hong Kong protesters and young students. So I think, David, you're 100% correct on this. When Marxist parades are permitted or even promoted in the United States, but veterans parades are denied, we need to think about which direction that this country is heading towards and what kind of models that the CCP had already set for us. Are we going to walk the same way, or are we going to stand up and say, hey, no, enough is enough? David.
Yeah, that's a great point. And thank you for bringing up Tiananmen Square. That's really important, because That's a great analogy to show you that what's happening here is this country's taking a turn for the worse. We can't even have a parade for veterans, but they will for Marxists. People, wake up. You want to talk about woke culture? This is what the woke culture needs to wake up to. We have everything so backwards right now. And believe me, you just heard it from Isla. She's a Chinese American. She's telling you. She knows. She's been there. She's been through it. She sees the way this country's heading. Doesn't want it to go that way. Neither do I. That's where we're headed, though. Unbelievable. So, staying on the topic of China, NASA is criticizing China after rocket debris splashed down in the Indian Ocean. Let's play that video now, please, Chris.
NASA is strongly criticizing China for allowing its biggest rocket to shower debris back on Earth. Over the weekend, wreckage from the Long March rocket crashed into the Indian Ocean. In a statement, NASA said, quote, "It is clear that China is failing to meet responsible standards regarding their space debris." Ramy Innocenzi reports now on why at least one U.S. scientist calls China's actions reckless.
From these first images of China's Long March 5B rocket blasting off April 29th to proud cheers, to these last blurry images of it falling out of control back to Earth over the Arabian Peninsula Saturday, criticism is now crashing down on China after rocket fragments rained down near the tropical islands of the Maldives.
It's an alarming thing for them to be doing.
Harvard-Smithsonian astrophysicist Jonathan McDowell says China's rocket has a design problem.
We normally make sure they don't go into orbit at all, or if they do, they have a restartable engine which can bring them down in a controlled place.
Let's be clear here. It's not that China can't, right? It's that they don't.
That's exactly right.
Was it price? Was it laziness?
I would think it was lack of concern.
After the rocket's re-entry, NASA Administrator Bill Nelson called on spacefaring nations to minimize risks and maximize transparency. But China played down concern from the start.
Beijing does not take criticism easily of anything it does. How would you approach them to say, guys, listen, we need to change this?
If the US comes, yeah, they're not going to take that well. The best we can probably do is have some sort of international committee that comes up with recommendations that are not coming from one country, so it's not politically tinged.
For CBS This Morning, Ramy Innocencio, Hong Kong.
Yeah, he said something interesting at the end there, having a committee of inter. Yeah, you think China's really going to listen to that either? The CCP doesn't listen to anything either. And that's the problem we have with this whole rocket situation. And what I want to talk about here, this is irresponsibility completely by China and the CCP. It's just like everything else they do with every other aspect of their government and their relationships with other world leaders and their overall goal, which we know is to take over the entire world. They could care less. They really could. I honestly believe that China, the CCP, their lack of concern is, they created a virus to kill millions and hundreds of millions of people. Do you really think that they care about a rocket that they sent up into outer space that landed in the sea? What would have been the biggest irony is if that would have hit India, which is already suffering the most from the coronavirus right now, came very close to the country of India. But again, it's reckless and it's dangerous behavior by the CCP, and this regime does not care at all about what they do and about who they do it to. I love how he said that you can't really hold China accountable for everything because they get mad at you when you start to blame them for things. It's almost like it's like they're like a little child that does something wrong and knows they did something wrong, but if you yell at them, they're going to cry. And that's how I'm starting to feel about this regime in itself, the CCP. And it's ridiculous that these human beings act this way toward their own people and toward the rest of the world. And the one thing that's happening here is that we know this for a fact, is that China is stealing technology from the U.S. and other nations. That's how the CCP gets their technologies. They steal this from other nations because they don't have the scientists that have the capability to create like the rest of the world does, these these German scientists and American scientists, etc. They have no clue what they're doing, and now they've proven that more. They've proven it to to the highest level possible with this inept space program that they have now. They created a rocket that purposefully would not land or come back to Earth the way it was supposed to be, the way they're supposed to be built and made. It's like a general, it's kind of like a general way that you build rockets, is you build them so they can safely re-enter the Earth's atmosphere and land somewhere safely. They're engineered to do that. And again, the CCP just didn't care, just like they don't care about anything else. So really, this whole thing doesn't surprise me. While this thing was floating around the planet and was back in our atmosphere, I was thinking to myself, they don't even care. China probably wasn't, the CCP wasn't even what they were probably, having drinks with each other and making bets on where it's going to hit. I bet it's going to hit India. I bet it's going to hit the U.S. Let's hope it hits the U.S. They're probably having fun with this, just like they do with everything else. They're a bully, and we all know it. And this was just another way that they showed how inept they are and how they really are or shouldn't be involved in any kind of space program. And another reason why, Isla, that we should take down the CCP.
Right, David. I think it's really funny to see how what the CCP has responded on that. They say the probability of hitting people is too low to be of a concern. And the CCP has never bothered to control the fall of debris. And if the U.S. shoots down the debris, an asset of China or an asset of the Chinese Communist Party, the CCP says they will fight back. But please note that other countries all control the fall of their space debris. The CCP's approach is extremely irresponsible for the international community. And let's make some assumptions right here. If the debris falls on the U.S. land, the U.S. has rights to shoot it down. But if Turkmenistan requests the U.S. assistance because they are allies, the U.S. can also shoot down the debris. Or if the U.S. can prove that the debris will cause harm, the U.S. can probably destroy the debris while it's still in space. So what we see right now today is that CCP is posing bigger and bigger aggression to the U.S. and other countries into this world. Just like what David said, this is another reason of why we all need to take down the CCP. David.
Yeah, the bigger aggression is right. And that's what they are. Everybody knows it. We try to make sure we expose them every single chance we get here on the Fringe. And that's what they are. The CCP is a bully to the rest of the world. And again, Fringers, anyone out there watching right now, I want to make a point, and I want to make sure you know that we love the Chinese people. We do not have any disdain for Chinese people. We are against their government. We do not agree with anything the CCP says or does. We feel like the Chinese people are caught in the middle, and we feel bad about that. And we talked about Asian hate crime before, and there's a lot of hate against Asians because of the coronavirus. And the irony is people are so ignorant, they're attacking all Asians, not just Asians that are Chinese. They're attacking Vietnamese, Korean, Japanese, whatever, anyone that looks Asian because of the coronavirus, and that's got to stop too. But again, we need to make that differentiation. Do not hold the Chinese people to blame for what their government, the Chinese Communist Party, has done to the rest of the world and continue to do. The Chinese people themselves are not bullies. They aren't this way. They simply are under this regime that they must listen to, or they're going to find themselves disappeared. And that's just the way a communist government works. And guess what, Fringers? That's where we're headed to, because we have a weak government that won't take care of us and puts America last. And at every single turn, every time we report, I see more and more evidence of the United States heading that way. And I just want that to stop. So let's talk about a country that actually stood up to the CCP. And that's Australia. And let's play that video.
This week, China took its first formal steps towards severing government ties and communications with Australia, following a message from Beijing on Thursday that all dialogue at a political level would be cut off for years. Chinese importers of Australian fruit, meat and honey have reportedly already decreased or dropped orders in anticipation there'll be more sanctions on Australian products. And to help us understand where we are right now in Australian-Chinese relations is Professor Joe Siracusa, political analyst from Curtin University. Professor, good to see you. I've read some pretty scary headlines over the past week. I guess the main question is, how close are we to war with China?
Well, look, I don't think China and the United States, and by implication Australia, I don't think they want to go to war, but chances are, in terms of, it's zero. They have no intention. On the other hand, the chance of a miscalculation or an accident is about 60 to 75%. So we could easily find ourselves at war. And China knows that Australia plays a crucial role for America in this neck of the woods in terms of housing bases here, and perhaps airplanes and other things up north, etc. And China is very annoyed with Australia, but I think for all the wrong reasons. I mean, Australia has been talking about the drums of war recently, when I don't know what drums of war they're talking about. The Shanghai Communique, which no one seems to talk about in this country, has governed the One China policy on Taiwan since 1972, when Henry Kissinger, Richard Nixon, Chairman Mao, and Zhou Enlai signed up. So that's been the sort of the operating mode. And now when we talk about going to war over Taiwan, I think the Australians ought to just sort of maneuver a little differently here. They ought to sort of ask themselves, what can they do to serve in terms of peace? That is, they should be interlocutors. I think Australia should ask the United States right up front, do you repudiate or do you still support the Shanghai Communique? And the second thing they should do is go to the United Nations General Assembly and say, will anybody in this room, and there are 193 nations there, will anyone in this room support the territorial integrity and sovereignty of Taiwan? Now, this is a trick because Taiwan's not a member of the United Nations. So, let's find out why we're in this conflict. And the other thing, too, is Australia's going to have to start thinking why China is a threat. It's not a threat because it's a rising power. That's a very lazy answer for a lot of lazy people. China is a declining communist party. It's been going for 72 years as leader of China, though a little longer as a party. The Soviet Communist Party lasted 74 years, and the Chinese Communist Party leadership is terrified they're going to go the way of the Soviet Union. They don't want a regime change in their lifetimes. They're trying to figure out how to galvanize the country behind them, and they're doing that through this glorious unification of Hong Kong, Taiwan, etc. But keep in mind, the more we threaten China over Taiwan, the more we guarantee the destruction of Taiwan, because China doesn't have to invade Taiwan. I mean, they can just wait for it to fall. I mean, it's well within their gravitational pull, and they're close enough. It's only 100 km away. And all the planners I know in Pentagon say we'd lose a conventional war with the Chinese because they have closer lines of communication and missiles. And so the war would quickly go to the nuclear level, in which case there's no winner. So I think Australia ought to start taking a more nuanced approach to this and ask the United States straight out, are we still working with a one China policy vis-a-vis Taiwan? Yes or no? Otherwise, Australia is wasting its time and placing itself in danger.
It's really interesting what you say about the UN and how that may be key to Australia sort of rolling back from this situation. How likely is it, do you think, that the Australian government will go to the UN over China?
Oh, I think they should have done it about 6 months ago. Look, it's a very easy thing. I mean, you're going to ask the World Authority to look at where the COVID virus is coming from. You could also ask the General Assembly. Now, I know the Security Council can veto any decision to come to the aid. But if you find out that there are only about 14 countries in the world that think that Taiwan is a country that they're going to come to the aid to, that is, it has territorial integrity and sovereignty, then that's fine. Otherwise, the idea that Australia might be fighting alongside the United States alone. And look, no one's going to invade Australia. No one's going to be coming through the Sydney Head with combat troops. All they're going to do is just choke Australia by blocking the sea lanes of communication, and Australia will die a long, lingering death. So, it's not going to be dramatic. On the other hand, Australia has an important role to play. Small to medium-sized powers always have this ability to be interlocutors in the quarrels between the great powers. And, at the end of the day, the great powers do what they can do because they're great powers, and small powers do what they must do. So I think Australia ought to use all the leverage it can, and it has a lot of leverage in international circles, particularly at the United Nations, and ask people, put out a resolution, is anyone going to come to the aid of Taiwan? And if we do nothing about it, this thing will mature over a period of time. And, that's what the one door, one China policy is. It's for China and Taiwan to settle. But if the Chinese think that we're going to declare war over them about their approach or about what happens in Taiwan, we're literally assuring China, the Taiwanese, of a conflict they cannot win. So, it's sort of having an unintended consequence. A lot of people, a lot of the war hawks in this country think it's a great idea to defend Taiwan, but they don't have to.
Well, Professor, unfortunately, we're out of time, but it's great to get your insights today. Professor Joe Siracusa from Curtin University, thanks so much for joining us on Weekend Live.
Thank you.
Yeah, there was a lot of insight there, that's for sure. There's a lot to pick apart with that little 6-minute diatribe he had. I don't agree with everything Professor Curtin says, first of all. There was a lot of things he said in his comments that he was kind of almost within his own statements going back. It sounded to me like he really didn't have the answer. He was just kind of throwing out a whole bunch of scenarios and left my head spinning, I'll tell you that. But what I picked up from it and my thoughts on my insight on it is, first of all, there already is a war. As I stated earlier in this episode, there's a biological war going on right now, and China drew first blood, basically, as they say. They created the CCP, created the coronavirus and spread it throughout the world and killed millions of people. That's the war that's happening right now. He failed to mention that. He mentioned that dialogue at the political level, that the CCP said dialogue at a political level will be cut off for years. Well, for me, if you read into that, Isla, what you kind of hear is on a political level, dialogue will be cut off, but not on a trade level, perhaps. I think part of what's going on here is China knows, the CCP knows, that they need Australia for trade. I really believe that. And I think that's one of the misnomers about China and the CCP being, the CCP controlling China and China being the superpower, is they don't really tell us the truth all the time. We really know that. We know they have a lot of money. We don't know how much it is. And we do know that they need trade. And they are afraid. I agree with Professor Curtin on that one. The CCP is very afraid that they're going to go the way of the Russians. 72-year regime, and Russia made it 73 or 74, whatever it was. And they're coming to that mark right now, and they understand that regimes like this don't last very long in the big scope and the big picture of things. And what he said was, I don't know what the drums of war are that he's talking about, but the threat is that there's the threat of China to Taiwan and Hong Kong and the U.S. backing them and being supported by Australia. Now, he mentioned this and said it would be kind of worthless for us to do. Well, first he said, are we going to do it or aren't we going to side with Australia? And then number two, well, maybe we shouldn't because it'd be worthless to do that because China can just wipe Taiwan basically off the face of the map. That's not what this is about. See, the thing is, and we know this too, Isla, and we've talked about it before, is that the stance that China is taking with Taiwan is that they own it, period. And they're going to go in by any means necessary to take it over and to have full control of it, which they don't have now. The U.S. has already stated that they would, no matter what happens, they would be there for Taiwan. They've already supplied them with arms to defend themselves. And he may have had a good point. Would it be harder for the U.S. to defend Taiwan since we're so far away from there and China's so close? What kind of battle would that be and what would that look like? But my point is, Isla, would the Chinese really go and have a conventional war over Taiwan? I don't think it'd be worth it for the Chinese. And I'm going to tell you why. Because I think they know right now, the CCP knows, that a lot more nations don't like them than don't like the U.S. And I'll tell you that right now. Because if people didn't like us, they wouldn't be knocking down our borders to get into our country. And that's the truth. So that's something else you need to think about. The more we threaten China, the more we threaten the destruction of Taiwan, as he says. I don't agree with that. I think that we can stand up for Taiwan. And again, I don't think the CCP has the kahunas to start a war over Taiwan. I think it's all, political posturing and them sticking out their chest and bullying around other countries just like they do with everyone else. It just takes a country like Australia to stand up to that. And that's exactly what he's doing. Like I said, and I think Professor Curtin's missing the point on that, is that when nations stand up to the CCP almost always backs down. The one thing the rest of the world needs to realize, Isla, is we do not need China as badly as they need us. And for some reason, we have this process going on in our heads, or we're forced to believe that we need China so much. We don't need China. President Trump made that very apparent and very clear when he started the decoupling process with China, with the CCP. Build more jobs, make U.S. great, make America great again, Isla. That's what it was about. Get the jobs back into the United States, get our factories up and running here, build more factories, get more jobs going for Americans, rely on ourselves. We were doing it with fuel, and now that's not happening because President Biden overturned all that too. So they do know that when they push an issue too far, they're going to get crushed. I think the CCP really knows that. I think they're all talk. I really do, Isla. And the more I see reports on them, the more I start to believe that. The one way we can see, though, that that's true is because they know they're not strong enough. They try to weaken other countries from the inside, and that's the way they've done it with the COVID, with COVID-19, with the coronavirus. They've created a virus that weakens countries from the inside, so we can't fight when the time comes. And that's kind of if you think about it, it's kind of a smart move on the part of the CCP, but it's something that we should definitely be akin to and we should be well aware of, and that's what they're doing. Australia will die a long and lingering death. I do not agree with that at all. I think if Australia decouples from the CCP and from China, and I think it's a great example, and other nations need to look at it, that it can be done, and they will do it, that other nations need to follow suit. And you watch what happens to the CCP after that happens. We need to hold them accountable anyway for everything they've done. But once we do that, and other countries catch on to this around the globe, we'll see that we don't need China. I think the money that they say they have isn't as great as what they say. They just have a lot of people. And that's the thing. People see a lot of people. They see a lot of money. And part of the problem is that is the problem, is that we are so hung up on money and how important money is to people. And, money is greed, and greed can destroy everything. And that's the problem. All their technology was stolen from us and the rest of the world. And cutting off trade will starve China. And that's a fact. And again, China is a money grab, to us especially. And we have a great example of that. And that's what happened in Hollywood just a few weeks ago. Hollywood re-released Avatar in China so that it could become the biggest grossing film, money-wise, of all time. Because they knew if they re-released it in China, and they used Chinese subtitles, and they succumbed to the Chinese way of thinking, the CCP way of thinking, that you make it more friendly toward the CCP and their ideologies, that they would allow their people then to watch the movie, to go and see it, and they would spend their hard-earned money on it. And the U.S. would, Hollywood, not the U.S., but Hollywood would benefit from this by making lots and lots of money. And that's where the problem is right there, Isla. That's the biggest problem, is we're so convinced that if we don't decouple from China, we're the ones that are going to be choked off and starved. And that's not the way it's going to happen. And President Trump made that very clear. And when he started the decoupling process, I was getting excited. I was like, this is it. This is how you take down the CCP. What's happening now is not going to take down the CCP. And I think they're getting very, very scared, Isla. I think that Professor had a point. Professor Curtin had a point there I think the CCP is getting scared. I think that's why they're creating biological weapons to weaken other countries so they can take them over, because I think their days are numbered. And I think that's an exciting thing to think about and to look at, because we here at the Fringe and G News and GTV, we know the number one mission, our number one mission, as directed by Mr. Miles Guo, is to take down the CCP. So I guess the excitement I have to inject into this, my insight into this, is that I think what's happening here is the CCP is fighting with their backs to the wall. I really do, Isla. Or they wouldn't have released that coronavirus to try to weaken other nations, because they don't have many other options right now. I hope you're able to hang with me on that conversation. Communism never works. Again, there's only a few communist nations left in the world. You know, we have China, Cuba, Laos, Vietnam. And that's why the regime in Russia fell apart. And I think the Chinese know that. That was a great point by Professor Curtin. Again, I don't agree with everything he says, but I live in America and I have a right to not agree. So there's that. Over to you, Isla. Thanks so much.
Thank you, David. I think you made a very long and full analysis on how you view Professor's viewpoints, especially on how Australia responded to CCP's aggression. I want to say first about Taiwan. Taiwan is the biggest political leverage that right now CCP is posing to the Western world, except from the coronavirus, what we see the biological warfare they have already launched. But I think for people who understand the Taiwan situation, that what CCP wants ultimately is not just Taiwan. CCP is aiming at Japan and the US ultimately. So I think Taiwan, despite being in a very dangerous position, but it's not CCP's ultimate goal. And also, whether the world needs China or not, I think the world do need Chinese people and do need the Chinese market, especially on the trade and financial side. But the world needs a China without the Chinese Communist Party. That's my viewpoint of it. And I think today, CCP is trying to walk the pathway of North Korea. Think about how ridiculous that the CCP is posing some sanctions against Australia and against other Western nations. And I think posing those ridiculous sanctions is already a sign of this communist regime falling down. And we have talked a lot in the past episodes about how the CCP used money, used the media to control and infiltrate the West, and used the trade, of course, to control your financial market, control the Wall Street. And they send their children or the spies to be in contact with those politicians, with celebrities, with stars in Hollywood, and of course with those elite families, so that they share the same interest. Those interests represent the blood money from the Chinese people. And I completely agree with David on a point that why has CCP, released a biological weapon, released a CCP virus to the whole world? Because they are scared. They're scared that when their regime is unstable, that they won't achieve their world domination. So they actually do that to try to stop Hong Kong people to go on the streets to protest, to try lock down globally, to have people be in prison in their home. And in essence, CCP, in military-wise, is a tiger. It is a paper tiger. I think a lot of people have noticed that. And look at those CCP officials. Every time when they're doing a public speech, they're so good at bragging about how powerful the communist regime is, but never spend 1 second thinking about the countless lies they have talked about to the whole world. Australia, of course, stands up against the CCP. And in fact, I believe all countries that want peace and prosperity should stand against the CCP. And even us, members of the whistleblowers movement and members of the new federal state of China, chose to fight against the CCP. And our mission, like what David said, led by Mr. Miles Guo, is to take down the CCP eventually, because we know taking down the CCP, eradicating the communist regime, is the one and the only and the ultimate goal, that to have the Chinese communists, have the Chinese people and the world a peaceful future. David.
Yeah, you made some really great points there, Isla. And something I want to kind of backtrack on a little bit here and talk about for a second is what you said about our reliability upon the Chinese. Now, upon the CCP in China, I don't I want to have a relationship with China. Obviously, I don't not want that. I do want that. But at this point right now, in order to take down the CCP, we can't afford to do that.
Right.
I understand that China and the CCP has a lot as far as, again, it may not be as much as they are saying, but there's billions of people that live there. So there's got to be something there monetarily, worthwhile to the rest of the world, obviously. There's no doubt about that. But I think at this point in time, we need to decouple. And I've been saying that now for a very long time. What the implications to the Chinese people, I wish there was a way we could do it where they wouldn't be affected by it. But I think it also either would be a chance for them, for the Chinese people, and for the rest of the world to see how sadistic this regime really is. I think it's a chance for them to open their eyes and to come out of that cloud of brainwashing that they've been forced to believe. They are restricted in any kind of knowledge about what's going on outside of China. They're constantly monitored. They are not. They have one. What is it? One television channel they have there? CCTV. Is that right?
Right.
Yeah.
That's
so they have
national channel.
Yeah, they have one channel where all of the information that's fed to them is obviously pro-CCP propaganda and anti-everybody else propaganda. Is that correct, Isla?
Certainly.
So what decoupling also does, I think, it helps the Chinese people to realize what's really going on with their government. Unfortunately, Isla, I think some people maybe even feel comfortable living in a communist regime, like they want their lives to be controlled. There's a point probably where a person can be so brainwashed that they think it's okay to be controlled.
Right.
Then again, why would so many Chinese people want to come over here and become citizens if they weren't trying to get away from that? The sticky situation that they find themselves in, and it's a very precarious situation in China, is the Chinese people can't speak out against it, but they can certainly do everything they can to get away from it. Now, obviously, it's very hard for them to travel over and get away from it, and come to the U.S. now. But again, once you're that brainwashed by a regime, it's really hard to come out of that cycle of life that you've been in and that you've known for, it's not even a whole generation, 72 years yet. But hopefully they'll wake up to all of that soon. I really do hope that we see that soon. And again, like you said, and like I said, that's what we're here for, to expose that. I think this topic we're talking about tonight with Professor Curtin is a very important topic. It's something that we do not, or it's kind of like what our show is aiming toward, to get to a point of what we're talking about tonight. And it's the coupling of basically the rest of the world from China, from the CCP. As difficult as it may sound and may seem to be, I really think it needs to be done. And I think 100% it needs to be done. The only way we're going to take down the CCP is to hold them accountable for what they've done to the rest of the world with coronavirus.
Right.
What they're doing right now to the Uyghurs in the Xinjiang province, keeping them in concentration camps, what they're doing to their own people with their brainwashing. We need to remember all of that, and we need to decouple from them. And I think Australia's taking the right steps here, Isla. I think the strength they're showing is something that we need to show. It's something we talk about, but we never do. And that's the problem I have with our current administration, is we have a very weak president, and we have a vice president that's just along for the ride because she thinks she's a shoo-in to be the next president. Well, guess what? Wake up call. What's going to happen in 2 years is the Republicans are going to take over the House and the Senate again, and then we're going to see a change. And I hope it's a change for the good. And I hope very soon that with the 2024 election, we get America back on top again. and we stand up again to the tyranny of this party, of the Chinese Communist Party. And I hope we're able to do it before it's too late. I hope the Biden administration can wake up to it and understand what's going on and take the steps that need to be taken to take down this tyranny, this party, the Chinese Communist Party, because everything that's happening right now in our world, especially in our nation, is a direct cause of a virus that they created, going back to the beginning again, that they created in the lab in Wuhan. And that's exactly where they want us to be right now, fighting amongst ourselves, division amongst ourselves, and our government, as weak as it is, we're ripe for the picking, as they say. And it's a scary time to be in right now. And it's a time where we need to be able to open people's minds to what's really going on out there and show that ridiculousness of ideologies like Black Lives Matters, Marxist movements aren't what's important, or well, that's important because we see that that's the direction our country's going into, and China loves to see that. Hey, Marxism leads to socialism, leads to Marxism, leads to communism. They love that. We need to break out of that. We need to break out of that way of thinking, Isla, and that's where I stand with all that tonight.
Right, David. I think, yeah, for decoupling, I completely agree on you and that it is inevitable, and it's probably very essential and should be done very soon to cut off the ties with the CCP so that we could all achieve the goal of eradicating this Communist Party very soon. And I do think that the conservative power in this country would come back. And maybe in the next year, even before the 2024, we will see how this election for the 2020 election, how those things got revealed maybe in the future. And I think it's a very complex topic, especially when we talk about what kind of strategies and what should we expect for the actions that should be made and should be took. At least I think in a very near future to fight against the CCP. We don't have much time left, especially when you think about the data of the COVID-19 cases. We have almost 160 million cases on a global scale, and India is still suffering. We're still losing our friends and families. People are getting vaccines, but did you see anything that changed? You have people dying because they got injections of the COVID vaccines, and Johnson & Johnson, Oxford versions of vaccines all got paused because of blood issues. So all of these things that we've heard and we've witnessed in the past year that directly points to the threats that posing from the Chinese Communist Party. I think it is the time, and sooner than later, that we all need to realize the threats, the actual threats from the CCP. And this is why we're here doing already 35 episodes of the Fringe show, to have those truths being heard by more audience. And words couldn't even express how grateful we are to have our Fringers and our audience from the Whistleblowers movement to continuously following us, right, David?
That's right. Now, that's a good way to close out the show tonight. We're over our time here on the Fringe. I want to thank everybody for joining us this evening, and I want to plead to President Biden: hold the CCP accountable. Hold them accountable. That's the word right there. That's the big word of the night: accountable. Thank you again, Isla. I want to thank everybody out there for joining us this evening. We definitely appreciate your patronage again. We really appreciate you joining us every Tuesday and Friday night here on the Fringe. We are on Tuesdays and Fridays from 7 to 8 p.m. on gtv.org, MOS Talk, GTV, G News. I want to thank you again for joining us this evening. Thank our whole crew, everybody behind the scenes that keeps us up and running. We really appreciate it. We thank you, and God bless you and your families, and have a great evening. Thank you very much. We'll see you Friday.
Thank you so much, Fringers.
他们的恐惧是我们的武器，我们的胜利 谢谢了，兄弟姐妹们，你们健身了吗？行动，行动，行动！中共，你完了 ！Take down the CCP！
beginning, but the games you want to play. Bring it on and I will fight to the end, just watch and see. It's all started, everything's begun, and you are over, cause we're taking down the CCP. Spread the word all through Hong Kong, we will fight till they're all gone. We rejoice when there's no more, let's take down the CCP. They have all lied for too long. We will end what they do wrong. Spread the word all through Hong Kong. Let's take down the CCP. Let the bullets fly a little longer, and you will surrender. Let the bullets fly a little longer. We will have freedom to live. We will win. You'll surrender. Let the bullets fly a little longer. 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 Let the bullets fly a little longer.
干灭中国共产党这个 CCP， 才能让我们远离恐惧。Take down the CCP.
They try to scare the nation with fabrication, but we see through the lies. We won't fall, we will fight you back. Police corruption with crooked assumption. They ran our lives, but no more. We will win. We will take down the CCP. Spread the word all through Hong Kong. We will fight till they're all gone. We rejoice when there's no more. Let's take down the CCP. They have all lied for too long. We will end what they do wrong. Spread the word all through Hong Kong. Let's take down the CCP. Let the bullets fly a little longer, and you will surrender. Let the bullets fly a little longer. We will have freedom to live. We will win. You'll surrender. Let the bullets fly a little longer. Let the bullets fly a little longer.
站起来吧！
Let the bullets fly a little longer.
站起来吧！
Let the bullets fly a little longer.
为奴役的人们
Let the bullets fly a little longer.
行动！
Let the bullets fly a little longer.
行动！
Let the bullets fly a little
你
longer.
完了
Let the bullets fly a little longer.
！Take down
Let
the
the bullets fly a
CCP.
little longer. Bullets fly a little longer, and you will surrender. Let the bullets fly a little longer. We will have freedom to live. We will win. You'll surrender. Let the bullets fly a little longer.
Take down
Let the bullets fly a little longer.
Take down
Let the bullets fly a little longer.
Take down
Let the bullets fly a little longer.
Take down
Let the bullets fly a little longer.
Take down
Let the bullets fly a little longer.
Take down
Let the bullets fly a little longer.
Take down
Let the bullets fly a little longer.
Take down
Let the bullets fly a little longer.
Take down the evil CCP.